superheroes, let me see you take off. I pray you never take your cape off. Even though more time we don't fly straight. But trust me, bro, I promise we gon' die great. Our heavy, but we ain't lightweights. Our parents were legends, they had to migrate. So that's the reason not to sit around and chat. I'm from the super.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Black Tech Unplugged. I'm joined by Jermaine today. How's it going, Jermaine?
It's going well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of my listeners probably are familiar with you and your work, but for those who are not, give a brief introduction of yourself and what you do.
My name is Jermaine Murray online. You might know me as Jermaine Jupiter or the JobFather. I am a career coach and a tech recruiter, and I've made it my life's mission to get as many Black people in tech as possible, or to help support as many Black people in tech as possible through the insights and the information provided to me as a recruiter.
So Jermaine, you know we're going to have to jump into the moniker, you are the JobFather. Where did that come from?
It came from one of my boys, actually. So I told him, it was like last year, I had this challenge where, to give your viewers some backstory, since 2019, I've always had this challenge of trying to get 100 people into tech in 1 year, right? Or 100 people in their jobs within tech in 1 year, whether that's getting them a new job or, helping them break in. And I wasn't successful in the first 2 years, 2019 or 2020. We topped out at 67 and 85 respectively. So I said to myself, like, I was watching Malcolm X, and like I was like trying to like find some inspiration. And then when he was like, by any means necessary, I was like, that's gonna be like my motto, my approach. I'm gonna help 100 Black people get jobs in tech by any means necessary. And I went on like this rampage, and my friend, he was the 34th person that I helped. He was my best friend too from like high school. 34th person that I helped get a job in tech last year. He was super skeptical because he spent about 10 years doing membership sales for a fitness chain, right? And he was like, what skills do I possess that would make it worthwhile or like even make it viable or possible for me to get a job within tech? And, we were able to put together like his skills in a way that showed him to be a really strong customer success manager. And he got a job offer where it was all remote. The base salary was the total comp he was making in the gym. And he only had to work 4 days a week. So he was like, yo, you got me. You literally gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. You are the JobFather. And I was like, oh shit, yo, that's it. That's it. And it's kind of like how it kind of came about. And the name is so ridiculous that it actually just sticks around. I think Jermaine Jupiter is much cooler than the JobFather, but like it's the JobFather that people remember.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I always want to call you Jermaine Jupiter just because of Twitter. And that's always my first thought. And I'm like, his last name is not Jupiter.
I mean, I'm okay with Jermaine Jupiter. Like, I'll pretend like I'm like a rapper. You're calling me by my alias. Get to live out my rap dreams without actually performing. But no, like it was hilarious because I was also going through this whole phase where I was like watching like The Godfather. And like that's probably where my friend like got the inspiration, but it fits in a way because like I want to like be someone people can turn to when like they're at their worst for like their career or they're coming across blockers. I think a lot of people within like the Black community as well, for some reason we don't have access to the knowledge that we should. For these different high impact industries and sectors, right? Mm-hmm. I had no idea what a tech recruiter was growing up. I spent a lot of time of my life, of my early 20s, trying to figure out what I could do. And like, I never, like for the first 26 years of my life, I never considered tech as a viable solution because I was under the assumption that you had the program, right? Mm-hmm. And I had no one around me to talk to me about what it's like to work in a tech, right? Not even from like a graphic designer point. Like there was no entry, no knowledge base. And hell, like I really, really lucked out in finding like my path, because I went to school for communications and theater. Like, to quote a comedian, I was doubling down on unemployment. I, in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm not even supposed to be here because I just kind of fell into it, but thank God that I fell into it. So I'm making my mission, especially for like Black people, to like spread awareness and also build up confidence that, there is space for you as you are. And if you can't find something that you enjoy, it's possible for you to gain the skills in a non-linear, non-traditional path, and give yourself access to employment and opportunities that help you with work-life balance, make you feel fulfilled, and gives you all the perks that you see people talk about, with a bunch of the drama that you see people that that they don't talk about. But I promise you, it's worth it.
And you know what? So you've touched on a few things. We're obviously going to go back and touch on probably all of them, but I want to start with getting into tech, because as you mentioned, you started off as like basically an English and journalism major. So how the hell did you make the transition into tech?
I just leveraged my my transferable skills, and I put myself in a position or pursued roles where those skills would be of the most value, and it would overcompensate for any lack of technical knowledge that I had. I started out by I remember I was in a dead end job, and I was managing an enterprise rental car branch, and I was gonna go insane because like the customers were just disrespectful. I had to clean a car in 30 degrees weather in a suit, and like it was just a bad day all around. I was miserable, and I was like, if one more effing customer comes through that door, I might go to jail tonight, right? And I was just miserable, and I was like, I thought about all the different things I wanted to do with my life, and I asked myself bluntly, like, yo, no judgment, if you could do anything in the world, what would it be? And I said, I would play video games. I want to get paid to play video games. And then I asked myself, are you willing to put in the work to become an esports player or to be a professional gamer? And I said, nah, but I would like to work around games. So like, I don't have to do this Hunger Games shit the next time a PlayStation comes out. Spoiler alert, I had to do the Hunger Games shit to get the PlayStation. But so I went on Sony's website, and I made a list of like game companies I would work at, right? And I was going on their job boards and just trying to educate myself on like what it is that they got going on, and kind of see like what I could immediately do and what I could do and needed some figuring out in order to completely understand the job descriptions. And I went on PlayStation first. I went on their job board, and I looked for all the jobs that put an emphasis on communication skills, because I love to chat, right? Anything presentation, and anything that was like just built on people skills. I suck at math. That's why I went for an English major. Like I ran from math, like I ran from it. So I was definitely not like, that's why I'm not a programmer. I'm like, I'm not a programmer. It's not my forte. Algorithms and mathematical equations. Nah, not me. That's not my ministry. Right. But I found the opportunity for a senior technical recruiter, and I was reading the job description, and I was like, I can do a lot of this. I already had my business doing resumes and interview prep. And it was a lot of it was like screening resumes, interviewing people. And then there was a sales aspect of convincing them to take your offer over the other. And I was like, if somebody gets me in a room and they ask me to convince them to take this offer over another, they are going to take the offer. Like I can convince them. I could definitely sell them on it. Mm-hmm. And then I saw that the only gap between what Sony was asking for and what I had was that they're asking for 5 years of experience doing this. So I scaled it back. I was like, all right, I want to work at Sony, but I need 5 years of recruitment experience. Where could I go to get that? Where the entry-level recruitment jobs are? And I found my way through agency recruitment, built up enough experience as an agency recruiter, and then transitioned into being an internal recruiter. And I've just been jumping to internal recruitment opportunities ever since. But it all started with identifying what skills would be the most valuable and packaging them both in my resume and how I talk and how I what skills or achievements I chose to highlight during discussions, conversations, or interviews through that lens, right? And convincing people that I already had everything that they wanted just from separate areas of my life. And there was no challenge in getting onboarded in this job because they're just asking me to put it together, right? And somebody was convinced, they took a shot at me and like been going hard ever since.
Now, one thing that you mentioned that I want to make sure that people catch though, is this, am I correct in hearing that you said that you were doing like resume reviews before actually getting into the role?
Yeah.
So what made you even want to start, like, why were you doing that? It sounds like it was a side hustle.
It was me trying to process trauma. Let me explain. And I mean that in a jokey way, but not so much. So I went to school for broadcast journalism, and I wanted to be, when I graduated school, my goal was to be the Black Larry King, right? So I wanted to work on radio and everything. My radio handle is Audio Chocolate. You know, some people cringe when they hear that. I embrace that shit. And I had a show for like 18 months on Sirius XM talking basketball, and I loved every second of it. And the show got canceled, and I was heartbroken. And I was trying to get back into like radio. I wanted another radio job, and I was so desperate. I went to a resume writer, and this resume writer charged me $650 plus tax, 13% sales tax because it's in Toronto, it's in Ontario. Yeah. $650 plus tax for a resume, and the resume ended up being 6 pages for 18 months worth of experience. And this resume writer just so happened, if anyone's listening to this and you live in Toronto, Markham and Ellesmere is where this resume writer was. And the reason, and down the street, down Markham Road, is TSN, which is our sports network here in Canada. Mm-hmm. And I remember I got the resume from the guy, and I drove all the way down Markham Road to TSN. I walked in the front door at TSN, and there was a Black lady, a Jamaican lady, sitting at the front desk. Yeah. I walked up and I handed her my resume because my dad prior said that I can't be sitting on my ass for my job search, applying online. I need to walk in and hand in my resume and let them see me for what he said. So when I did that, the lady was like, "Who the hell are you? What are you doing here? This is not how we do this." She's like, "Honey, no." And then the joke was she took my resume, because I had my resume in a duotang, right? Yeah. I had my resume in a duotang, and she did one of these. Who wants to read this? It's too long. Would you want to read a novel? If you're on top of 100 different things you have to do? And then she just ripped my ass apart. And I drove home from Scarborough all the way to Brampton. And I had a long time to think, because there's always traffic on the 401 and 410. And I just wanted to know how I could prevent myself from going through this again. And I studied and I broke down and I made myself understand resumes, the dynamics of resumes, what they're for, who reads them, how to make a successful one. I realized that a resume is a sales pitch. It's marketing for your skill set. It's supposed to entice somebody to want to meet you, right? Mm-hmm. And it's supposed to do it very quickly and efficiently. TV ads usually aren't long, right? They're 30 seconds to a minute. It's advertising. It's the same thing with your resume, right? And you want to front load it with just relevant shit, because they don't have much time to read through the resume. They just want to know what's relevant and what's going to make them say this person's going to make my life easier. And once I understood that dynamic, I started writing resumes, and I just started jumping jobs, right? Because it would be my friends used to make this joke, I would either get fired on a Friday or I would quit on a Friday, and I'd have a new job on Tuesday, right? Because I was just able to just jump and job hump. And the joke is that I got to a point where I got cocky with my applications. I started we would be having smoking sessions in my boy's car. We were gonna pass him the spliff and everything, and I'd be applying on Indeed, and I'd be like, I bet you you'd be betting money on like which applications are gonna call me back. Right. And I just felt so cocky about the resume, and I won most of the time. So they were like, yo, can you make us resumes? And I started making the resumes, and my boys started getting jobs, and it was like, you know, that's how the business kind of came about, from the trauma of this man charging me $650 for a 6-page resume with 18 months of experience on it, which I'll never get over.
Yeah, I can't imagine like an 18-page resume and like you gonna go
6-page resume for 18 months.
6-page.
A year and a half of experience. Your resume should never be more than 2 pages, even if you have 20 years of experience. And for a year and a half of experience, this man gave me a 6-page resume.
6 pages.
6 pages.
Now that you've learned the lesson from that, because you are way beyond that stage and you've done a lot of research and, have more insights to the resume game, give me and the listeners like your top 3 tips when building out your resume.
Number 1, understand, like have a clear intention of what you want the resume to say about your skill set and understand who the resume is for. So understand your audience, more or less, right? If you're applying for a data analyst job, it doesn't make sense for you to be putting your experience as a cashier unless you were doing data analyst related stuff as a cashier, right? Mm-hmm. So that's number 1, understand your audience and write to your audience. Number 2, never go past 2 pages. Mm-hmm. You don't need to. The trouble that a lot of people do is that they give an even amount of attention and detail to each of their experiences on their resume, when in fact, the most relevant and the most important and where you need to put the most bullet points is the most recent experience. Anything that's older than like 3 to 5 years, if you're not using those current skill sets within your current job, or as a consultant in your side hustle or something like that, those skills are considered like expired. They're outdated, right? Mm-hmm. What was the world like 3 years ago? Exactly. We're all outside, exactly. Right? So you have to, put the relevant stuff with the current experience, only focus on relevant stuff on your resume. Don't go beyond 2 pages. That's rule number 2. Rule number 3, always skim your resume in 10 seconds and try to see what you come away with. Are you able to retain and understand the intention that we set out in point number 1? And if not, you got some tweaking to do.
Okay. I want to throw in another question, because most times when people are talking about resumes too, everyone wants to put those keywords. And so what they'll do is like slap the keywords, in their summary or, somewhere on the resume, I'll say. How do you feel about keywords?
Keywords are important for your resume, but people are doing it for the wrong reason. So whenever people talk to me about keywords or buzzwords, it's always a relation of trying to like trick the ATS systems or the AIs behind the ATS systems. And I'm here to officially tell you, as somebody that has used ATSs for every day for the last 7 years, most companies don't have the ATSs that you're afraid of with the auto reject. Anytime you get a reject email, it's because a man like me read your resume, say you're not a good fit for the position, and then hit a button that sent out a rejection email. But a human being always verifies and checks and sees like what's on your resume. So people put buzzwords in because they think it'll bypass the system. I've had people tell me like they put buzzwords at the bottom of their resume in invisible ink, right, or in white font, right, to bypass the screening shit. And I'm like, that's not how that works, right? You just look like an idiot. Sometimes like we see that there's the keyword and we're like, what the fuck is this, right? Mm-hmm. The reason why keywords are important though is because of what I mentioned earlier. Recruiters skim, right? They're skimming and they're looking for keywords to help them retain an impression of you that you can do the job. Keywords are best used when you put them in your skills chart at the top of your resume, and then within like the actual experience and the context, like the content of like the body of the resume, you are giving context to how those skills were used in what settings and how you made achievements and exceeded expectations in the work environment using those skills and those keywords. And that's because when somebody is reading, right, they're going to see your name, they're going to see the skills, aka the keywords that you put, and then they're going to go to your experience and they're going to read how you use those same skills in settings where you made money for the company or saved the company money, depending on what your function is.
Okay. And you know what? I want to dig just a little bit deeper on the subject of resumes, keywords, all that. And this is based on even your previous experience of you transitioned into tech, right? Well, as a recruiter. And so a lot of people, when they transition in, obviously they think putting all these keywords is the best way to go and all that good stuff. So for someone who's transitioning into tech, needs to update their resume to actually get some hits when they apply for certain jobs, what tips and advice do you have?
Well, I would say the first tip I would say is to have a clear understanding of like what your gap is, right? What your gap is from the job that you want. Because some skills, some transferable skills are going to matter more in other jobs than they will other jobs compared to other opportunities. Like somebody could be a strong customer service person, right? And project managers and customer success managers are two different jobs that both value that type of experience. But because of the technical implications of a project manager, right, they might value the customer service skills less than, say, the customer success manager, where there is no technical aspect to it. And then they can understand clearly, like one-to-one, how you would be a good fit for this position, right? So it's understanding where the most value is going to be. And then, because sometimes like where you're most valuable and what you want are two separate things. What you're good at and what you've had success with are two separate things, two separate kind of discussions. So you need to figure out like what kind of approach you're taking and which approach has the most value, right? And that's why you got to be fluid and you got to be able to like be willing to like move and change your perspective on yourself to see different angles and different ways you can package your skills and like understand which opportunities are going to value which skills more. So when you put yourself in those positions, in those rooms and having those discussions, it's easier for people to be like, I can see how this person is going to improve the thing that we got going on here.
Yeah. I think one point to also add to that is, so you mentioned knowing like the gap, right? But knowing the role itself is very key, because some people just be applying for any and everything and don't even know what the role really calls for. So knowing the actual role and what you need to do so you can amplify, what you've already experienced is very key. Don't just be applying to any old random job and hoping for the best.
Exactly. Like, again, like that's why I said you got to be intentional, because you got to understand what it is the job is looking for, like what they're actually asking for. And you got to put your best foot forward to answer that call. Like I am the specialist for this special problem that you have.
Yep. And so also while you were speaking, you mentioned a point that you're actually from the 6. So if people miss that, you are from Toronto, Canada.
I'm from Toronto.
I'm 100% honest. A lot of people don't see Toronto as a huge tech hub.
That's a mistake.
Okay, so let's talk through that. I was going to ask, so what's the Toronto tech scene like?
Zoom, Facebook, Salesforce, Airbnb. There's more. There's tons more, but I'll just start off with those companies. You don't have those companies without Toronto. Full stop. You don't. Look up the University of Waterloo, BlackBerry. Are you? I don't know, Dina. You look very young, so I don't know if you remember Blackberries.
Oh yes, I remember BlackBerry. And
you remember Blackberries?
Yeah, it was because it was based in Waterloo.
Waterloo.
I feel like
That's
everybody had an internship there when I was.
Yep. And that's that Toronto tech scene, that Kitchener Waterloo tech scene. So like Toronto is a huge tech hub when it comes to talent, so much so that we have San Francisco coming in and using the US currency against Canadian companies to leverage and poach talent, right?
Mhm.
We are just as every bit as good as our US counterparts. We understand the culture, we understand the language. We're cheaper as a workforce because of our currency.
Yeah.
So we are highly in demand. And a lot of startups be starting out in Toronto, right? So don't underestimate us. Don't underestimate us. I would say like first of all, Toronto is more expensive than San Francisco as a city to live in, right? And that's because of how active the tech sector is, right?
Mhm.
And we have so much innovation going on. Like tech is what's driving our city, or driving our hub. And you know, like again, we export a lot of talent to San Francisco. So like some of your like this, we on Zoom right now. We wouldn't have this without Toronto Tech.
Which is interesting because I feel like, well, I guess maybe it's because of the American, like obviously I'm in the US where we think, you know, we run everything, of course. But
Yeah.
I have had experience with like Toronto Tech. So I know that it's, you know, been up and coming. I know it has a lot of things going on. So it's just interesting to hear, especially from someone who lives there, that my assumptions and hypothesis are correct, that it is making moves and people are there. But I have heard also that they're stealing your talent and they're taking their talents to the Bay. So
I mean, we taking our talents to the Bay, but like that's just the internet connection. We still in Toronto.
that's true. Very true. And like from a startup scene perspective, would love to get your take on what are some of the startups that you see that you think are going to take off, at least let's say in the next year.
That's hard to say. I can't really answer because like, yo, the economy is in the gutter, and it's only going lower. It's very interesting to see like a lot of the scale ups, I like to call them, like the companies are in between enterprises and startups that had a lot of pandemic fueled growth. If they didn't have like consistent profitable revenue models, they are the ones that are suffering right now. While as like the smaller startups, they're kind of weathering the storm because they haven't planned to go profitable for a couple of years. So it's like business as usual. But within the Toronto seed, so think about the Canadian markets is that I've noticed that they each have like a little bit of theme or they're influenced. They're influenced by like the city that they're based in. I'll give you an example. Historically speaking, Toronto has been the financial heart of Canada. It's where our stock market is located. It's where most of our big banks are headquartered. Our Wall Street is in Toronto, right? As a result, we have a lot of financial institutions, investment companies, investment firms, real estate investment trusts, right? Teachers' pension plan unions, like everything, money is around Toronto. And as a result, we have a shit ton of fintech companies, fintech startups based in the city. And it's because I genuinely believe that a lot of our talent was exposed to the financial or the insurance industry, saw the problems firsthand, and decided that they could build out these solutions because there's definitely a customer base for it. Montreal, which is the French part of Canada, has always been known for its arts and theaters, right? And like being the heart of like Canadian expressionism. Like this is where like your artists hang out. It's in Montreal, right? If you're an artiste in Toronto or in Canada, everyone does at least like one pilgrimage to Montreal where they live in Montreal for like a couple of months or a couple of years or something. And Montreal's tech scene is all what they call deep tech, artificial intelligence, right? Being creative with technology to solve new problems, green tech, audio technologies, computer vision, right? Things that we've never seen before. Breakthroughs are happening in Montreal. That's where all of our video game companies are based out of as well. And they do, like I said, artificial intelligence within their video games.
Mhm.
And then we got healthcare. We got a healthcare sector, Vancouver, where we film all our movies. That's where all of our marketing tech and ad tech companies are based out of. So different themes.
Okay. And it's interesting that you mentioned kind of like all of the major cities, because to be honest, I go to Toronto every year. So I'm familiar with Toronto, familiar with the tech scene there. Never really thought of like exploring outside of like Montreal and Vancouver. So it's interesting that you bring that up as well.
Of course. Like you definitely like there's so much variety in Toronto, or in Canada, I should say. They should just rename Canada Toronto, to be honest with you, but that's neither here nor there. But like that's the beauty of like I think both North America, like both the United States and Canada, is that there's a lot of diversity in our lands, and because that diversity affects the way that people live. And because it affects the way that people live, it affects the way people think. And it affects people the way they think, it affects the way that they create. So it is always interesting to go to a new environment and checking out like the different scenes. Like you can do it with sports. Every city has a sports scene, even if they don't have like a NBA or NFL or MLB or a soccer league. There's still a sports scene there. You check out the sports scene, right? Or you check out like the tech scene. Like I always like to go check out like the tech scene, or black tech is like I always like going to new places and seeing how black people living, right? If there and then if there's big enough population, seeing what the black tech scene is like. I lived in Montreal for almost 2 years, and I networked by trying to figure out where all the black tech workers were at, and it was a great time. I met a lot of scientists. I got a lot of friends that are PhD holders. I got friends that work video games, and like it's crazy. It's just a space I never thought I'd be in. But like, yeah, Canada as a whole is a tech hub. I would say the major tech markets in the world, definitely Canada, United States, UK would round out my top three, and then I would have Germany sitting at the like in the fourth.
Okay. And actually, because you brought it up, I have to ask about diversity and inclusion and what you're seeing from a Canadian / Toronto perspective. What is that like in the tech scene in Canada?
Oh, it's trash.
I mean, I was hoping you were going to say a different answer because, as you probably know, America has a similar experience.
America actually low-key does better for their representation numbers than we do. Less than 3.9% of Canada's tech workforce are Black. I believe America's at 10.1.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Whew. And why do you think the numbers are so low?
Canada has so Canada as a whole is significantly smaller than the United States.
Okay.
We only have 36 million people coast to coast. For reference, Texas, California, and New York have more people. Los Angeles, New York City have more people than our entire country. So the population is smaller, the currency is weaker, and we're spread out over a larger landmass. We have a much smaller population of Black people, and the conspiracy theorist in me definitely believes that they changed up a lot of immigration laws to prevent Black people from coming over. But like Canada just recently, like Canada, just like I would say, like this last 100 years is where like the majority of Black people have started to come up to Canada. Beforehand, it was like people from like the underground railway, or people like Underground Railroad. Thank you. Are people that were brought over as slaves and then freed. Those were the type of Black people that were in Canada beforehand, right? And a lot of them settled in like Nova Scotia, for instance. And then during the 50s, when during the 30s, when World War II was going on, and Canada was still heavy within the British Commonwealth, right? We also invited Caribbean workers to come up and establish roots up here, right? And so that kind of opened the gateway. And then eventually the 70s, we now had mass migration from like the Caribbean, and like the early 2000s was like from Africa. But I've noticed that other demographics have been able to keep up their immigration numbers, but not us. And I always found that curious.
Yeah. And do you feel like, oh, there's a lot I got to unpack here. Do you feel like that Black Canadians experience the same situations in the workplace as US Blacks?
Yes.
Is it worse, or do you feel like it's equal? Not that being equal in this case is something that's
it's the same, man. White people are racist white people.
true.
It's closer here, like it's closer here than it is in like the United States and Canada are very similar in comparison to like the UK, because the UK's racism is wrapped up a lot in like classism. So I don't know if you'd be a racist or you're just looking at me because I'm poor. But like Canada, United States, like I think the United States does a better job of handling racism than Canada does, because y'all are at least willing to admit that y'all are racist.
I suppose, yes, that we are.
Well, I mean, like, sorry, half of you are willing to admit, like the other half keeps saying it's their history.
Right.
Which anyway, which is its own conversation. But like, yeah, like a lot of Canadians up until like the George Floyd incident, a lot of white Canadians really turned a blind eye to like the struggles of racism being highlighted by marginalized people, because they bought into this notion or this idea that they were the good guys, because that's what the Canadian PR and marketing machine turned out.
Right.
Canadians are the nice guys. Canadians are the good guys, right? Did you know I found this out in my 20s, but Montreal, the French side of Canada, was burned down in a slave rebellion by a Black woman.
Wow.
And they hung her.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
They don't teach you that in school. They don't teach you about how Toronto the Confederation had allies in Toronto that were planning to do a pincer attack to assassinate the vice president when he was up here. They didn't tell you about how Canadians tried to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. They didn't tell you about that, did they? Yeah, because they were trying to be like, yeah, fuck the crown. We want slavery back too. But like, and then don't even get me started on the indigenous residential schools. We're still finding out bodies of like indigenous children in these residential schools, and they're by the hundreds. And it's like Canada is a racist ass country that fooled itself into believing it was otherwise.
Right. And we got to go back and do like a history episode now, because yeah, you mentioned a lot just from a historical perspective, but you are absolutely right. It was always the narrative that, Canada, you guys were the good guys and everyone's so friendly, the neighbors up north. And it's like you mentioned, once the whole incident with George Floyd happened, it was like, okay, we're kind of seeing that the same thing is going on just in a different place. And so it's very interesting to hear firsthand from someone who lives there that the same sentiments are going on, because unless you hear from someone who lives there, and people have been very vocal on Twitter about it as well, you would have no idea that this happens in Canada at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, to go back to a lighter note and more back on the tech side. So Jermaine, you worked at many companies as a recruiter, but you ended up starting your own business. And so I want you to tell my listeners what that business is, which I'll just say it's JupiterHR. But then also, what was your motivation for actually starting your own company as opposed to just working for someone else?
So JupiterHR, career coaching practice, resume writing service. We do interview prep. We help people with their job applications. We support people and help them with their job applications. We do referrals with companies. We do recruitment events. We recruit. And we also, again, coach people for interviews and help them, just making sure that people are more attuned when they're going for their job search or their job interviews. but we take a special interest in Black people. Like this might sound a little off, but people ask me all the time, do you only help Black people? And I go, no, we help all kinds of people from all backgrounds. We just celebrate the Black ones more than the others. And I know that sounds awful, but like it is what it is. Like I said, like we represent only 3.9% of the industry. So I have to overcorrect to balance that out, right?
Right.
So we specialize in that, and right now our biggest our milestone achievement that we're working towards is to say that we've helped 500 Black people get new jobs in tech. We're at 324. Nice. And my business is to get to that 500.
And for people who are listening, what are ways that they can help you get to that 500?
You can help by getting to that 500 by either directly booking our services, right? Resumes or career coaching, salary negotiation, mock interviews, or even just following me on social media. I do share a lot of free resources there, and engaging in those resources, using them to help yourself or using them to help people that you know. A retweet or like a share is always appreciated. And if you also know if like your company is hiring or your company is looking to get more Black people in the funnel, hit us up. We can either set up a referral program with your company or take them on for recruitment engagement and really inject Black people into their pipeline.
Yep. And actually, I took one of your tweets. Someone I was working with was looking for a new role, and that Etsy job that you tweeted about, their apprenticeship, I should call it.
Yes.
I had someone apply for that. So yes, you do tweet a lot of very helpful information in different roles. So definitely follow you on Twitter. What is your Twitter handle for people who are listening?
All one word, Jermaine Jupiter with a J and an E at the end. That's the correct way to spell Jermaine.
I have not seen Jermaine spelled many other ways, but I'm sure people get creative out here.
Oh man, there's Jermaine with a J and no E at the end. There's Jermaine with a G and an E at the end. There's Jermaine with a G and no E at the end. And sometimes I get Germany.
And that is clearly not your name.
It's clearly not my name. There's nothing German about me.
That is correct. And Jermaine, so I want to dig into, because I know there are a lot of people, or I should say I'm seeing more people act as like career coaches and getting into that lane. What recommendation do you have for people who are, well, I'll start with my first question. With people who are looking for a career coach, what do you recommend they look for when seeking out that resource?
When it comes to career coaches, I think the number one thing is to go with your gut and to see how you feel about them and like the dynamic or rapport that you have with them. I feel like it's important for a career coach to always establish and understand what your needs and your success, what your needs and what your want is and your definition of success, and adhering to that. A career coach will also always be real with you. I never met a career coach that was good at their job that suggested that any type of career transition could be done in a matter of weeks. It takes a lot of hard work, takes a lot of time. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes that you don't. Right, so a career coach should be honest with you about timelines, and also a career coach should establish boundaries. We're not here to do the job for you. We're not here to make the decision for you, right? We're not here to do the work for you. We're here to tell you what the best route is. We're here to tell you how to optimize the skills that you have, and we're here to tell you of the challenges and pitfalls that you could expect. We're also here to help you when the unexpected happens and you need to navigate through the bullshit.
Yeah. And, speaking of timeline, because I know you've seen the Twitter fights about, transitioning into tech and you should get 6 figures right away. You've probably heard it all, read and heard it all. What is your perspective on some of that, though? How long would you say, and I know the question is a little bit loaded because it varies by person, but how long would you say when you're working with someone, let's just say they have no tech experience and they're transitioning into tech, to get into the industry and actually get a role?
1 to 3 years.
Really?
It can happen before that 1 year mark, but it all depends on like how technical of a role you're going, like what kind of experience that you have. And like how big of a jump are we talking? And depending on what you have to learn and what you have to produce project wise, yeah, it could be anywhere from like you should steel yourself. If you're brand new breaking in, steel yourself for at least 1 year.
Interesting. Okay. I think you are the first person. Well, I haven't asked a bunch of people, but the first person to say a year. Usually people are like, oh, it can take a couple months, which
It can. Like, don't get me wrong, it can.
Right.
But like for your own sanity, budget for a year and be pleasantly surprised if it happens before that.
Okay. And today we've talked a lot about just like resumes, your job as a career coach, and also your transition into the industry, as well as the Toronto tech scene. But to wrap up our conversation today, first I want to talk through, I believe we've talked through it a little bit, but your goal for the year is 100 Black people into tech, correct?
No, we did 126 Black people last year.
Okay, but you had a year goal. I swear I saw it on Twitter.
So last year was to get to 100 Black people, and we did 126.
Okay.
This year there is no like set goal. The goal overall is to get to 500. We consolidated the people that we've helped since 2019, came up to 324. We're trying to get that number to 500 total.
Got it. Okay. And so let me rephrase my last few questions then. So being that we're almost at the 6-month mark of the year, we're almost halfway through the year, what would you say are your top accomplishments as a recruiter as of right now?
We've gotten about 38, 39 people jobs in tech so far this year. I would say that JupiterHR has done a much better job of engaging and creating partnerships to make the pipelines easier to get more Black people in some of these companies. And I would also say, from a personal standpoint, there was an organization that I helped over the course of a year inject over 200 Black candidates in their pipeline.
Wow. 20
of them got jobs. So I'm really happy about that.
Excellent. And we're talking about you feeding the other, your company is feeding other tech companies, Blacks who could get into their roles. A lot of people wonder about that process and how you make that happen. So can we go over like at a high level how you're making those partnerships happen?
Yeah, so it a couple of different engagements. So one, the first way and the free way is through our referral program. I have a job board where I can where I have contacts at companies, and if anybody's ever interested, they hit me up and they can get a referral to that company contact for that particular job. The other way is also like through our blog and our free resources that we put on social media. The other way would be with partnerships through recruitment services, where companies directly hire us to go out and like seek people, Black people, for them to hire and engage with them, more like the passive people into like thinking about new opportunities within the space. And then there's the career coaching, which isn't necessarily us getting you in, but enabling you to understand where your weaknesses are in your approach, in your interviewing style, in your resume, and optimizing that so that you put your best foot forward no matter what encounter you have. Networking, interviewing, basic conversation, emails, you name it.
Okay. And also want to make clear, so even like when you're basically creating that pipeline for individuals to get referred into these companies, just because you're bridging that gap does not mean that you are giving career coaching to all of those individuals. That is a separate service.
Correct. Now we do host free sessions, like free career coach community sessions, and anybody that we refer or we recruit into a position, we always do include free interview prep.
Okay.
But those are for the engagements that we reach out and touch base for people. But if someone like sees the website or they're like, yo, I want you to interview prep me, we do have the services calendar for that.
All right, excellent. And as I mentioned, we're at that 6-month mark of the year. We're halfway through 2022. What do you foresee happening for you for the next 6 months? What are some of your goals?
Some of my goals would be to extend and establish more partnerships, right? I think right now we are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're at 5 formal recruitment partnerships with companies. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see that number double by the end of the year. And I'd like to see my team grow in terms of recruiters and sourcers in order to help us get to I can get to 500 on my own, but the next stage after 500 is 1,000. And after 1,000, it's 10,000. And after 10,000, it's 100,000. I can't do it by myself. So growing the team, identifying like-minded individuals and pulling them into the fold so we can really do this work is one of my key goals for the next 6 months.
You know what? People don't often talk about scaling. And obviously, you start from the bottom and now you have some people on your team. I want you to answer one, how did you know that you needed to add additional resources? And then also, how did you find the best fit for your company?
The way I found out to scale and I needed additional resources was when I started dropping the ball with different engagements, I forgot about a client that had a delayed response and they slipped through the cracks. So I had a few issues where people were slipping through the cracks, and that was when I was like, I need to get some administrative help, and that's when I brought on my assistant Nicole. And then it was I realized that I wanted to grow the business and I wanted to keep the engine moving forward, and I just had too much on my plate. So that's when I brought in an extra resume writer, which is another woman named Nicole, but completely different person. And then I brought in 2 career coaches as well to help offload some of the more some of the career coaching sessions. And we're building out a platform where people can actually build individually with them. And now we're looking on, I'm in the final talk stages of we're getting a couple more sourcers on the team trying not to sneeze, for our recruitment efforts. But yeah, the team has been growing. I think we're at 11 people right now. We also have a job application support specialist. So for one of our services, people can outsource their job search to us, but we'll on their behalf, I shouldn't say outsource, but upgrade. So in addition to them applying for jobs, we assign someone from our team to also apply for jobs, both in and outside of our network. I always people think I'm a sick individual for saying this, but I have a saying where you should try to apply for 30 jobs per day. And my partner is very critical of that because she says I'm promoting hustle porn and, not promoting a work-life balance. But I try to explain it as you're not going to hit 30 jobs a day. You're going to run out of jobs within your city, but you're supposed to hit a wall because you're supposed to look at new aspects, new avenues of where opportunities lie. It was that mentality that made me move from Toronto to Montreal, because I applied for 30 jobs a day and I ran out of jobs in Toronto. And I had to ask myself if I'm willing to look elsewhere. When I moved to Montreal, if somebody offered me a big bag of money and I said yes, and somebody did, and I was like, I guess I'm moving. But yeah, and that overall, we just want to be able to help, but also scale and grow, so that I find that I didn't used to charge for any of my services, and I found that I got overwhelmed really, really early, really easily, and I wasn't doing anyone any good. So the charging of the services was able to filter and organize and figure out what people want, but also to sustain myself. And I'm getting closer and closer where this can be like what I do full time. And like, that's the other thing I would like to have by the end of the year, to be able to like have this grow to a point where I can support myself full time.
Awesome. And I mean, so you really wasn't charging people for your services before?
Yeah, the joke was is that I wasn't, and then my girl, I started dating my partner, and she heard one of my coaching calls, and she was like, "That was amazing. How much did you charge that person?" And I was like, I didn't charge her. She was like, "You did that for free?" And we had this conversation about like value and like people attributing worth. And I didn't listen to her at first.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of a week, I got stood up 5 times.
Wow.
And because she kept saying to me that people don't value free, I got stood up 5 times. So she challenged me to start charging. And she was like, let me know when a person that you charge just flakes on you, it doesn't show up. I was almost like 3 years ago, well, for like the career coaching thing. And no one has flopped. So she had a point.
Yes. Plus, always charge what you're worth. You are not worth free.
Honestly, my whole thing was I'm just trying to help as many people as possible, and like especially Black people. You notice, we have more barriers in other communities, and I always try to be accessible, which is why even though like I may charge for a lot of my services, I'd still insist on creating free content and hosting free spaces and hosting free sessions. And I charge to make people resumes, but I give away a free resume template with a guide on how to make your own resume, right? With a guide of everything that I do when I'm making a resume. So like I always try to like provide people value one way or the other.
And that's definitely what I appreciate about you and the work that you're doing, is that your ultimate goal is not to make money, but to help people within the Black community, get into tech. So definitely can say I can appreciate that. And then one final question for today is in regards to resumes. So you've probably seen a lot, and you've probably seen some crazy things, but what is the one thing that you constantly see on resumes that you wish people, like the common mistake that you wish people would stop on tech resumes?
Please stop putting professional summaries on your resumes and put the education at the bottom of the resume.
Oh, let's go through professional summary though. Why no professional summary?
The most valuable space on your resume is the first third, based on what we said about people skimming through your resume. Mm-hmm. Professional summary doesn't do anything but waste time in the most valuable real estate of your resume.
Oh, so then what should people put at the top?
Their skills,
mm-hmm.
or their keywords, and then they jump into their experience.
Interesting. I say interesting because from the resumes I've seen, they've always had that, professional summary at the top. So
have you sat and screened 100 resumes before?
Not 100, but a lot of resumes, yes.
You start skimming and skipping through those professional summaries, don't you? Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
Listen, you can't get my secrets out now, but yes, you do. Skimming through that, yes.
Folks listening, I just proved why you don't need the professional summary. Thank you, Dina.
You are accurate. And Jermaine, I appreciate your time today. Any final words, tips, or advice to give the people listening to this episode?
Tips or advice? Honestly, the best thing you can always do is to network, go out and find community, find people that look like you with experiences like you, and try to genuinely learn about who they are. Become sincerely curious about people, and you'll find and have a desire to meet as many people as possible, and you will build the ultimate network from that point of view. Excellent. Well, Jermaine, again, thank you for your time today. I think my listeners have learned a lot about resumes and all the lies we've been told at this point. So appreciate your tips and advice. And everyone, make sure you go follow Jermaine on Twitter, where he continues to give this advice on the daily, as well as tweets at different opportunities. So again, thank you, Jermaine. Appreciate it. My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and all the best to you, Dee, and great work here. Thank you. Okay. Take care. Bye. Bye. I can make my world come true.
Well, my dreams will see me through. And if that will get me down, my dreams will turn things all around. With a smile upon my face, I can see a better place. Doesn't matter what blow, I can